Good afternoon, all. Thank you very much for coming on our session. To reach this noble task people from IPI put in front of us, we have a group of very respected journalists from all corners of the beautiful world around us. Give me some time just to say a few words about each of them. Next to me is Cape Diamond, journalist and human rights activist, advocate from Myanmar. Is a multimedia journalist, Emmy-nominated news producer, and award-winning documentary film producer. Cape is also Sakharov Fellow of the European Parliament and the human rights advocate. During a Rohingya genocide, Cape emerged as a major journalist who provided extensive coverage of human rights, crises, and conflicts in Myanmar for international media. Cape documentary productions were featured on ABC News, Al Jazeera, CBS, and others. He has provided contributions to two prominent documentaries, Myanmar Killing Fields, which won a BAFTA award, and Rohingya Exodus, which won a gold medal at the New York Film Festival. Next to Cape is Anastasiya Stanko from Ukraine, from Kiev, journalist and TV presenter. I met Nastya 2 years ago in Croatia. We were in the same panel like today, and she was so offensive, good, and direct in that discussion. I expecting the same role today. You know, it will be excellent for the, especially for the public. In 2013, she's co-founder of the independent media channel Hromadske, which is registered as a non-governmental organization, where she currently is a member of the General Assembly. Since early days of the Maidan Revolution, anti-government demonstration in late 2013, Nastasiya has covered the protest in Kiev, streaming hours of video. In March 2014, Stanko was in Crimea, covering a so-called referendum and annexation of the peninsula. 2 months later, she became a war correspondent, reporting the conflict that began in Donbas area of Ukraine. In June 2014, she and her cameraman were taken hostage by the so-called Luhansk People Republic and held in a basement of a building in the Luhansk city. 2 days after, she was free, which you can see also. Next to Nastya is Haggai Matar, who finally came to Sarajevo. Actually, he came yesterday, and he was just 1 kilometer away from a tarmac, and the pilot decided to return back to Vienna, but he came this morning from Frankfurt to Sarajevo just 2 hours ago. Haggai Matar is an award-winning Israeli journalist, political activist, and the executive director of the 972 magazine, an independent media outlet operating on the ground in Israel, Palestine, committed to resisting apartheid and the current war on Gaza and to promoting justice and equality. 972 magazine is the only shared Palestinian-Israel outlet operating in the country. Haggai is also board member of the Journalist Union of Israel. And what Englishman said, the last but not least, Patricia Evangelista, as a trauma journalist and former investigative reporter for the Philippines news company Rappler. Probably you know that name because the lady who ran the Rappler, she got a Nobel Prize for peace. Together with the Russian guy, Dmitry Muratov, yeah, who is banned to work as a journalist now in Russia today. Had the B book, Some People Need Killing, a memoir of murder in my country, an account of the Philippine drug war, was hailed as a journalist masterpiece. This is that book by the New Yorker and won the Helen Bernstein Book Award. The book, released October 2023 by Random House, was a New York Times top 10 best book of the year, a New Yorker and The Economist best book of the year, and was Time magazine #1 non-fiction book of the year. I mean, in our country, we can say you have to stand up, just, but don't need, okay, we're going to start. How we got this panel to talk about war crimes? Actually, one of the initial idea for this panel came 2 years ago when Mediacentar from Sarajevo, I'm running that institution, started with one project to make interviews with the journalists who decided to be witness in front of the Hague Tribunal. Probably Hague Tribunal is, everybody knows what we are talking, but not so many people know that almost 40 journalists all around the world, except America, except United States, testified before the International Criminal Tribunal for the ex-Yugoslavia in Hague in the cases of the war crimes committed in Yugoslavia in the 90s. Actually, it's not in the whole Yugoslavia. That war crimes committed was in the 2 republics of now independent state, Bosnia and Herzegovina and Croatia. Why did you testify was our first question for all the people among some of the biggest journalistic stars, not only in Europe, all around the world, from Martin Bell, veteran of BBC, to Ed Vuljami, Guardian correspondent, and is it David Bowen? I saw him, he talked about Sarajevo and war and so on, and I saw him that he reported from Ukraine in the first years of the war, and also reported from Israel in the beginning of the war in Gaza. And now a question, why did you testify? And the Hague Tribunal, we've got different answers, but generally they said, we as a journalist were witnessed on different events, and why not to be witness in front of the Hague Tribunal? Only American journalists refused to appear as witnesses before the Hague Tribunal. What was the reason? They said, we don't want to give our journalist notebooks to the prosecutors, to the court. The other reason was, in that case, we are jeopardizing our contacts. And the last reason was, they think that if they started as a witness in a Hague Tribunal, they will betray their profession, and they will betray journalistic objectivity by testifying in the courtroom, whatever. All others were ready and was not so happy, but I mean, they started and they were a witness in front of Hague Tribunal. I will start just with that same question for all of you. In a case, if some court, international or domestic, call you to testify about the things you found as a journalist or you made as a stories, did you testify? We'll start with the Cape, near to me. And
well, hello. Okay, for me personally, I come from a country like Myanmar. We have a lot of problem, including war crimes and human rights abuses. Personally, or professionally, I would say, yeah, I will testify. But for the stories that already been published, so regarding that, I can, testify. Yeah.
Nastya.
Yes, of course.
Of course, yes.
The Philippines is at the moment being investigated by the International Criminal Court for possible crimes against humanity. As to whether I'll testify, it's not a question I'm willing to answer in public. However, I wrote a book. It is a public record. The end notes are complete, so it can be used as they will.
Okay, now we are going to start again with the Patricia. The first question for all of them, just to say to all of us, which texts or story they made, they will never forget. That is what was the most challenging journalistic piece they made in their career regarding topic we are talking, it's war crimes and the human rights abuses.
How about I tell you a story instead? Let's start with a once upon a time, yeah? So once upon a time, there was a little girl named Lady Love. She was 11 years old and she was small for her age, all skinny brown legs and big dark eyes. Now, nobody called her Lady and everyone called her Love Love, but only her father called her Love, just Love. One night, late in the night, two men burst into the room where she slept with her mother and her father and her many little siblings. One of the gunmen, because they were gunmen wearing masks, stood over her father and then said, "Positive." Positive, he meant. Positive for being a suspect on a list of illegal drug use or dealing. So Love Love's father tried to sit up, but there was a baby asleep on his chest, so he fell back down again. Then he turned his head. He looked at Love Love and he said one word. He said love. And it was the last word he ever spoke before the bullet cracked through his right temple. So the baby wailed and Love Love's mother wept, but it was Love Love who thrust herself between the gunman and her mother. And it was Love Love who stood with the barrel of the gun just inches from her forehead. And it was Love Love, 11 years old, all skinny brown legs and big dark eyes, who swore at the gunman and demanded he shoot her instead. "Kill me," she said, "not my mom." So the gunmen left, but they weren't gone for long. When they came back, one of them stood in front of Love Love's mother, raised his gun arm, and said, "Duterte kami. We are Duterte." And then he emptied the magazine, and Love Love's mother died on her knees. When Rodrigo Duterte ran for the presidency in 2016, he told a story. He took every fear and every grievance, fueled by decades of failed expectations, and then he gave the enemy a name. He called it the scourge of illegal drugs. He said, if your neighbor's child is an addict, kill them yourselves. It will be a kindness to their parents. He said, if you don't believe him, I will feed you the drugs yourselves. Feed it to your children and watch them become monsters. He ran on a platform of death, and he was democratically elected. My people applauded, and thousands died. That's the story I've been telling for 7 years.
Haggai.
I'll take a recent story that we published just a few weeks ago. It's a story from the war in Gaza. It was a story that 972, together with Local Call, broke recently, basically showing the quite unprecedented use of AIs to generate automatically kill lists of Palestinians in Gaza. Basically, as someone recently put it to me, with an algorithm not undifferent from the one Netflix uses to suggest content to you, basically choosing who to identify as Hamas members and therefore as legitimate targets. They have another AI that then finds the people and tells the army where to strike with no human supervision almost at all. That story, based on sources from within the Israeli army who were looking for someone to talk to and did not know anyone in the international media, and the local Israeli media is just not interested in these stories. They came to us and just shared in great detail how many thousands of people were killed because a machine said that they are Hamas, and nobody knows even how to backtrack, how to figure out how the machine reached that conclusion. So basically accepting the killing of thousands of people, and for each target accepting up to 20 casual damage in addition, and in some cases up to 300 people alongside that target. That is a story we recently broke, and it's one of the most terrifying stories I've ever seen, especially as this feels like this frontier of war crimes with the risks of AI, and where war might be going in the coming years.
Okay, Nastya.
Small context. Now I run the investigative agency in Ukraine from last year. I'm editor-in-chief, and our investigative agency before the war mostly was focused on anti-corruption investigation. But when the full-scale invasion started, we become journalists who are going to the front line, become war correspondent, and also investigating Russian war crimes. And one of our story, it was film which we published last year about two girls who were deported by Russia to Russian occupation territory from Kherson. It's a south part of Ukraine. They were 16 and 18 years old, and maybe you know that Russia deported near 20,000 Ukrainian children to Russia or to occupation territory of Ukraine, which occupied now by Russia Federation. And we were focused on this story, try to understand more how this process was going on, who helped Russians on that territory to move these children. And two girls helped us. We found them through social media, through their Instagram, and they decided to help us with the materials, made the video on their phones, and we understood that situation for them become worse and worse because they helped us with materials. And in one day we understood that we should maybe help them to escape because of us the situation for them become worse in that place where they stayed, where they kept them. And we saved these two girls, helped them to come back to Ukraine. And this was a big challenge for us, how to cover this story and how to be not only journalists, because we are journalists. We are not someone who try to help to evacuate, to save people.
Thank you.
Well, sorry. So as I previously mentioned that, Myanmar is a country with war crimes ongoing daily basis. So I will share my recent, documentation of one of the war crimes in Myanmar. So it was a few months back. I make a trip to Myanmar-Thai border. And so this is for the documentation of human rights abuses and war crime for an NGO so I'm working with. So basically, so we went to that area. So we interviewed the victims. So so there was a grandmom and her grandson. So the grandmom is like 70 years old and the grandson is like 13 years old. So on 20th November 2023, so they were just sitting at their house like at night around 3 a.m. and the Hunter aircraft bombed the village. So they were just sleeping And then suddenly the grandmom, she feel like something is like warm under her, the under body part. And then like she realized that there was a bomb drop from the fighter jet. And then she was calling for help. So with the grandmom, the grandsons was also like hit. So and then they were sent to the hospital, which is at another village. So same day they went to the hospital. They were sent to the hospital. They had an operation. The grandmom had a um upper angle ammunition, you call it, like the right one. And then the grandson, who's 13 years old, he had a booklet, like lower angle ammunition. So it happened like they had an operation around afternoon, 20th November, the same day. But then there was another airstrike on that village where the hospital is. So they experienced another airstrike in a different location, technically same day. So like they were kind of like experienced two airstrike in different area within 24 hours. So why I am sharing this story is, like Myanmar need, more attention. Myanmar has such kind of airstrikes and war crimes happenings every day. That's why.
Okay, thank you. Now, just go back to the project Mediacentar made about journalists from the world who were witness in an international criminal court for the ex-Yugoslavia. We ask them and give them hundreds of questions regarding war crimes reporting. And among all that questions, one was to talk about difference between objectivity and neutrality. And all journalists conclude that objectivity is a fact specific and that neutrality is something else. And BBC veteran Martin Bell said in our interview that talking about reporting from ex-Yugoslavia, mainly talking about reporting from Bosnia and Herzegovina during the war in the 90s, he said that you couldn't be neutral between the aggressor and the victim, between good and evil. And directly said, was I biased? Yes, I was biased. I was on the side of the victims. And let's finish this introduction with the words of the Elie Wiesel, Nobel Prize winner and a prisoner from Auschwitz. He said, neutrality helps the oppressor, never the victim. And that is a beginning of my questions to all of you. How you are dealing in your text with the objectivity, which is a part of normal journalism techniques and normal journalism ethics, and also with the neutrality in a cases you mention, or maybe some other case. Do you see the difference? How you are dealing with all that details and the ethical dilemmas in front of every journalist, especially when he's faced with war crimes and human rights abuses? Who is going to be the first? Looking because you are from Philippines.
Well, fuck. I don't believe there is objectiveness in journalism. I don't think it's feasible. The stories we choose, the way we tell our stories, are informed by who we are and where we come from. So my choice to cover a drug war story versus another story is already a judgment in itself. But I think neutrality is an interesting thing. I don't strive to be neutral either. I strive to be accurate. I strive to be balanced. I strive to be factual. But I come from a country that one day decided that the killing of its citizens was a wonderful thing. I've been a journalist for 15 years. I've covered massacres, I've covered conflicts, I've covered disasters, and the death tolls were way past the thousands. But the particularity of the drug war, and the reason I talk about it in terms of neutrality, is that I used to report about terrible things that happened because those things shouldn't have happened and shouldn't happen again. Then one day, the terrible became ordinary, and there was thundering applause. Rodrigo Duterte would step up to a podium and talk about 32 people killed by the police that morning in a 24-hour period in a single province. And he said, what a beautiful thing, and that more should die. That's the context where I'm coming from. That many of my people, many people I know, supported the war and supported the deaths of their fellow citizens. I'm not neutral. I do my job because thousands have died with the consent of many of my people, and I don't want to offer mine.
Yeah, can I add? I think that the context is very important when we talk about some facts, for example, and my context is that I live in Kiev, day to day, night to night, we are going to the basement in my apartment with my 3-year-old son. He come back to Kiev from my parents' house, which is on the west part of the country, which is more safety, because I want to be still journalist and want to do my job. And now he is in, I will say like this, in more dangerous place that he was in the beginning of war, because of I want to continue my job, to continue my work, and every day I think about it. My father-in-law was the soldier in the army, and now he has many problems with his health because he's 59 years old, and I think too old for fighting, but the reality as it is. Now what?
Can help in
Yeah,
some ways.
yes. Now I am sitting here and talking with you and my son in the kindergarten, and I know that right siren time to time is very loud, and my son also should go to some basement in his kindergarten, and he knows very well what is right siren is. And we have now a mobilization law, and my husband can be day to day also mobilized to the army, and my life will change again, and I understand this very well. And in all this, and when, for example, we have rockets at night for a couple of hours, I come to work, and I understand that we should continue our work, and I am like head of the newsroom, and my journalist who also slept maybe for 2 hours somewhere in the basement this night should continue their work, and I should inspire them somehow. But only one thing what we want is like to sleep, to rest, or something like this. And of course, when we are talking about neutrality or something like this, it's very hard to be that neutral journalist when you are inside this war, when this war is a part of your life, very big part of your life. Yes, I'm not talking even about how I'm going to the front line, and every day when I'm there, I think that maybe I will not come back to my son, and this is maybe not right choice what I should do. And to be honest, sometimes I think, I will say like this, we are in Ukraine, I think, very tired of this war, because it's sometimes, it's not a choice, like to do something, not to do, because every day people are killed in Ukraine, and you just take your camera or something like this and go to talk with victims, And yeah, we are very tired of everything of this, and sometimes think I don't want nothing, and sometimes I feel that I feel nothing, not joy, not when my friends killed, not even, you know, some sad or something like this, because it's so many emotions for these years. But why we continue? Because yeah, it's also a job, it's also stories. I know that every new death, it's a new death for their relatives, his or her relatives. It's new news, you know. It's not that we know that this was already, we saw this already yesterday or before yesterday. And that's why we do this, I think. And about objectivity, I think when we're talking about the facts, because you know how many how Russia tried to say that facts no matter. And of course, when you try to be more and more objective and produce facts, it's hard to say that it's not true. It's not that was in reality.
Haggai, that topic about neutrality, objectivity is pretty hot today in Israel, Gaza, and so on, and also many people from all around the world talking about that. And we have a different opinions. Even we have a battles on a street in universities just about that two topics, how that's happening in the essence of the event in Israel, in Tel Aviv.
So I think, I mean, to us, there's no question. We define ourselves as a media outlet that opposes apartheid, and we oppose the war. So there's no question. We don't presume neutrality or objectivity. These are just, we don't think of these as relevant terms. And very much like both my colleagues said, it's about being fact-based. It's about being fair. It's about being decent in the way that you do coverage. Some of what it means to be fair means, for example, focusing on the voices of Palestinian journalists in Gaza that don't get a voice. And this is since before the war, that nobody was paying attention and nobody was listening, and being a platform for those voices. And especially now when so many Palestinian journalists in Gaza are being targeted and killed, which is a good context to say that this evening they're receiving an award here at the IPI. So I really recommend everyone come, a collective award for Palestinian journalists in Gaza who deserve it. So uplifting those voices is something that's really essential, and I think is essential to journalism, not just for politics. It's essential to making sure that people that don't have voice are heard. At the same time, it means that while we spend most of the time, and 972 magazine has existed for 14 years now, and most of the time we report on Israeli war crimes, because those are the main war crimes that are being committed, it means also dealing with war crimes when Palestinians commit them. So when there's an October 7th and Palestinians massacre Israelis, we need to speak about that as well. And when there are hostages held and raped in Gaza, these are things we need to talk about as well. Not out of a commitment to balance, but out of commitment to human rights and international law and fairness.
But how your position is seen in Israel, in public opinion, for the other media, how they see that?
We are.
Are you traitors or are you heroes?
We are very much alone. The stories that we tell would quite often be picked up and re-reported by outlets such as CNN and BBC and Le Monde Diplomatique, and basically all over the world, such as the story I was telling you about before. But then they wouldn't be picked up locally. We would try to tell journalists in Israel, look, we broke this incredible story. It's, you know, we're talking about it on Al Jazeera, CNN, BBC, Sky, all these channels just standing in line to talk to us about it. Will you take it, like, to a local TV station? And they just don't want these stories. They're like, you know, our audience doesn't care. Our audience doesn't want to hear these stories. And so we won't tell them. And by so doing, I think they're replicating the way that Israelis think, or mostly don't think, about the war crimes being committed, and they reaffirm that it's fine not to do that. And then when we try and challenge and kind of hold not just the government to account, but also the rest of the media to account, they're offended. And yes, sometimes they see us as traitors.
Cape.
Well, I have come to sorry, all the way, I was born under the previous regime. And then when I finished my high schools, it was a time when the country was open up. And then that's the time, the journalists, exiled journalists came back, they started reporting on so-called democracy era. And then we have a Rohingya genocide. So at the time I was reporting on the Rohingya genocide. So for me, I've always been looking for the 100% accuracy. Another one is like, I never want to be a mouthpiece of the oppressor. It's like, okay, so at the time, it was under the Aung San Suu Kyi government time, civilian government time. So at the same time, many of the local media in Myanmar, they were kind of like picking up what our government said and what the military said. Like for me personally and like professionally, I did not really do it, but I would say, being independent media, we always had to double check, if it is like the right one or if it is true. For an example, when there were thousands of Rohingya girls and women were raped, Aung San Suu Kyi state councilor Facebook page came up with the Facebook post and announcement saying fake rape. That was the time my mind was blown up. Of course, in Myanmar, we all know who is villain, right? The military is villain, right? They are the one committing. But at the same time, at the time, the civilian government were supporting the act of villain, right? So I was very clear. At the time, these independent media, including me, like people hate us so much. The general public, they hate us so much. They call us like traitors. Oh, you're working for the attention media, you are criticizing our government, you are criticizing our military because like you are a traitor, you receive a lot of foreign monies and stuff. I don't care. Well, somehow I really care because I never tell people publicly that I'm a journalist. I never tell them. I never told them. I try to separate my life. But then turn out when the coup happens in 2021, and then people started realizing that they were wrong, and then they started applauding and appreciated the journalists and stuff. Well, thanks so much for that. But and then again, I don't want to be praised again, because in Myanmar, if you are like praised, if you are like make us a hero or whatever, like you will be monitored. Like whatever you do is like mainly heavily watched. So I never want to be like that kind of level again. So professionally, I would say my priority is 100% accuracy and not to be a mouthpiece of oppressor, especially the oppressors. Yeah.
Haggai, you mentioned other media, what they think, and that is a also interesting topic, that what we called here media solidarity, how the other media following especially stories about war crimes and other things. I told you that in Bosnia and Herzegovina, it's not the how to say, it's not a normal way that other media will follow media who open any kind of war crimes and so on. Probably they will be rather silent, not to say anything. And it means that who started with a very provocative topic and so on, mainly remain alone. What is the situation in your countries when you open that stories about war crimes or human rights abuses? What is the behavior of the other media? Do they follow you, or are they silent, or are they indifferent, or what's happening? Patricia.
Under no circumstances was I alone. The Philippine media stood up. We used to be the freest press in Southeast Asia. And in the aftermath of, during the drug war, it became more difficult to be reporters. While we were the freest press for quite a long time, the Philippines was considered one of the most dangerous countries in the world for the media. The death toll for journalists in the Philippines is very high. Even with that, and particularly perhaps with that awareness, everyone stood up. Well, not everyone. There were reporters who believed in Rodrigo Duterte, And there were institutions who, even if they did not, they were afraid. There were reasons to be afraid. Rappler, my own company where I used to work up until 2019, their license to operate was suspended. My Maria, our founder, was charged and convicted. And there are still many more charges. Other institutions lost their licenses to operate. It went across broadcast, print, and multimedia. The president once said that the fact that we were journalists was not a reason to be protected from assassination. I thought the fact I was human should protect me from assassination. But even with that, I worked the night shift. So it was, we called ourselves the night shift. It was a group of reporters, photographers, filmmakers from all over Metro Manila who covered the drug war. So it was body after body, following body after body, night after night. And the only reason we survived, is because we were all together. So institutionally, people supported each other, but as journalists, we did too. No one was left behind in the field. And it was dangerous, and both mentally and physically, but we did it together.
In Ukraine, okay, I understand that all Ukrainian media are the part of the same front and they are similar and so on and so on. But do you see any other voice in any Russian media, any which is near, or I'm talking stupidity?
It's important to mention that Ukraine is still a democracy, and for example, for us was also one big challenge to continue cover anti-corruption investigation against people in the government, in the office of the president, during the big war, when very big country with very big army fighting against us, and we understand that it's a question of survival and we should all of us be together, but sometimes we see that people in the power still try to steal money when we fight with such a big enemy, and in one day we understood that we can't not investigate also these problems, and our colleagues from other Ukrainian medias also do this, and I think that it's also about bravery, but also a very big challenge to do this, how to do this, and very big responsibility, because we need this support from Western country with weapon, with money, and we understand that we should still be democracy, but also it's very important how to talk about all this investigation cases. But I feel support. Yes, about war crimes, I also feel support. We have some even competition between us. For example, when I was talking about this deportation of children, which is also one part of genocide, when children are deported to another country, learn another language, become citizen of other country also. And it was some competition between different journalists how to talk this story. But we have more than 132,000 now criminal cases about war crimes, and for all of us we will have so much time to investigate all these cases. But about Russian journalists, I will say that we don't have in general some connection even between us and Russian opposition journalists, and I will not say that we can talk about some supporting each other, something like this.
Yeah, Haggai, you mentioned a couple of things about other media, but would you like to add about this media solidarity and so on?
Yeah, I mean, there are very few Israeli journalists, mostly in Haaretz newspaper, that do excellent work, but it's very rare. We don't get enough of that. I also want to pay attention a little bit to international media, where I think we are seeing, like, as I said, people picking up our stories, people showing solidarity, people listening to Palestinian journalists. I feel the gap that still exists in the way that the international media treats this story, especially around the war, is the complicity of Western governments in what is happening in Gaza and in Israeli war crimes. So it's very easy to say, the Israeli army just did this, but to constantly remind who is arming Israel, who is funding, who is giving the diplomatic umbrella to allow this to happen, which are the governments of those other media outlets, is something that I think is really, really essential. And I think that's where I would want to see more effort of the international media.
Kate, do you have some examples that the other media in Myanmar trying to take down pressure from your shoulders when you open some topic?
Well, it is not happening anymore, I would say. Luckily, I'm very glad, I'm so happy about it. Well, when during the Rohingya crisis, like two journalists from Reuters, when they were investigating the genocide, they were arrested by the police, and they were charged. So at the time, some medias, they kind of like trying to make bad image of them. They were kind of like reporting in a way that these guys were investigating this because they've been receiving a lot of money. At the time, these two, they were my friends. So like even they were in the jail, whenever, we report about them, the majority of the people, they were kind of like, spreading hate speech against them, not only to them, but also to their media and to their family. But since I mentioned, when the coup happened, the general view of the public changed. They're giving support to us, they're giving kind of like hands to the journalists. At the same time, well, journalists in Myanmar, we always, most of us are always like united. If anything happen, even not related to the work, if anything happen, we are there to help each other. Now, most of the journalists are exiles in neighboring countries like Thailand. If there is anything happen to them regarding their work or regarding their status of livings in Thailand or anything, like we are showing our solidarity. So if anything happens, so we are there. So I'm glad, we have this good things out of the bad things happening in Myanmar.
Okay, now is the time for your questions. If anybody would like, there is somebody who is going to give you mic. Yes. This man in the third row.
Hello, this is Angel from a Bulgarian media outlet. I have a question to Haggai Matar. It's about reaching out to the audience in Israel, because you said that it seems like a Sisyphean task to use a phrase also appearing in Israeli media these days about the war in Gaza. But I imagine that being alone means that also that only specific readers within Israel would be interested in, like, that your audience will involve only a specific section of people who disapprove of the war, maybe, who want to seek the truth in a way that you don't see in other media outlets, maybe Harris that you mentioned. But how do you try to reach out to those beyond your bubble, if I may? Because I assume that the group that it self-identifies with what you write is not very big right now, especially given the fact that it's a war, it's after something terrible that happened on the 7th of October, and emotions run still very high.
Thanks for that question. It's something we're struggling with every day. Basically, I do want to say, while a lot of people that would come to our site, this Hebrew site that we publish is called Local Call. We co-publish it together with Just Vision, and a lot of people who come are from that very, very small camp of people who already resist the war, but not exclusively. And I can say, for example, when we publish a story like the one on AI, we got a lot of people coming in who are either from the intelligence community or former intelligence community, a lot of people who are in tech and are interested in this. And we try to find different ways to tell stories. Just the other day, we published a story about art in Gaza. We try to reach people in different ways. It's much, much, much harder right now with the way people are completely exclusively focused on October 7th and on the hostages. It's much harder than ever before, basically, to reach people. And yet, we are seeing new readers. We are seeing people that are convinced. And by doing smart work on social media and with distribution and trying to reach out and trying to even tell people, this is one place where you're going to hear stories from Gaza that you don't hear anywhere else. You don't have to agree with us. You don't have to agree with its positions. We're seeing that in our readers. We're getting emails from readers who are saying, we don't agree with your positions on the war, but you're the only ones telling these stories. You're the only window that we have to what Palestinians are experiencing and for them to share their stories in their own words, which is why we're coming. So it's not enough, I'm afraid, but it's something.
Hello, everyone. My name is Victoria. I'm from the European Correspondent. I wanted to ask you about your experience of collaborating with human rights organizations like Freedom House, Amnesty International, Human Rights Watch, etc. Very often, you are the ones who are documenting war crimes and transferring this information to them. And after a few weeks or months of investigation and verification, they are publishing these reports. In my experience, these reports are not always fair and just. They are also humans are trying to do their best. But I want to know, maybe from the insider view, what is your experience of working with them? Do you feel like they also have a bit more, balanced view of different conflicts around? I don't want to specify a specific one, but in general, and how careful they are dealing with the information and the investigations that you provide to the war crimes. Thank you.
I will tell you a few words. Actually, we had a couple of scandals with Human Rights Watch and Amnesty International in Ukraine because it's about this neutrality, how to say that Russian make some war crimes and like Ukrainian also make war crimes, but Ukrainian, for example, made like 2, and Russian made like 2,000 or something like this, and this is in one report. I didn't remember now the numbers, of course, but you can read about all this conflict, and because it was in the media in use, and now they in Ukraine, I will say like this, they don't have such influence, and their report don't have such influence as it was before the full-scale invasion. And the other thing that in Ukraine, people think that this big world organization, they can do nothing about our main I will say like this, main war crimes. For example, I can talk about Olenivka. It's a prison camp in Donetsk region, which is under occupation territory in Donetsk region, and in 2022 more than 50 prisoners of war were killed in one of the camp in Olenivka. And there is investigation that Russia did this, but try to blame Ukraine, of course, for this. It's Ukrainian prisoners of war were killed there. And we don't have still nobody from United Nations, Red Cross, not investigate this case for now, and they don't have access, and as we see, don't want to have this access because they say Russia don't give us access, and what can we do? We can do nothing about this. And that's why this is a question like, what they can do and why we need this organization. And maybe you know that last year one of our human rights defender, Alexandra Matvichuk, received the Nobel Prize for Peace also. And she always says in her interview that I am, as a human rights defender, asked for weapon for Ukraine because human rights organization can do nothing for help people in captivity, for people in the occupation territories, because they are suffering. And when we're talking even about journalists, Ukrainian journalists who are in captivity, about two of them, for example, one is my ex colleague, we were working on the Hromadske together. We don't know nothing about what's happened with her for more than 1 year already. Nothing, just she missed somewhere on occupation territory, and that's all. For about another, my colleague, we know only one thing, that he is in captivity as a combatant, but he never was a combatant. He never was someone who took the weapon or something like this. He was journalist. He was kidnapped by Russians in the first days of occupation near the Kiev, near the capital, and that's all. And this is also big crimes, and nobody can do nothing with released journalists, with release, for example, children back, our try to come back our children. And this is the big crisis of this international human rights organization, I will say like this.
Okay, now we are at the end of the panel. The other questions will be for the different areas in a hotel. Our colleagues are today and tomorrow and even Sunday morning. Thank you very much. Thank you for all our participants.